What if the secret to profound human empathy isn't, studying philosophy, but actually learning how to ask a stranger to type their name in a chat box?
I mean, that sounds like a massive leap, right?
It totally does. Welcome to today's deep dive, where we're going to prove that it's not a leap at all.
Yeah, because today we are looking at a really eclectic stack of sources.
Right. We've got basic ESL teaching guides, language repetition drills, some vocabulary lists, and even podcasts about domestic chores.
Which at first glance, just seems like a random collection of English learning tools. We usually reserve discussions about altruism and self-sacrifice for these grand cinematic gestures.
Exactly, like a hero running into a burning building.
Right, or some billionaire giving away their fortune. You definitely don't picture someone trying to memorize verb conjugations or taking out the recycling.
Yeah, but the cognitive dissonance of finding deep meaning in those basic tasks is exactly why this deep dive is so compelling. Because when you strip language down to its absolute bare essentials,
Which you have to do for beginners.
right, it's a strict requirement. You strip away all the cultural noise, all the social ornamentation,
Yeah.
and what you're left with is basically the rawest operating system of how humans relate to one another.
I love that phrase, the operating system.
Thanks.
Mhm.
And understanding that system, it actually starts with the very first hurdle of doing literally anything difficult, which is, motivation.
Motivation. We treat it like a weather system, don't we?
We really do. We just sit around waiting for the clouds to part.
Exactly. Waiting for the sunshine of inspiration to just wash over us. You hear it all the time, right? I'll start studying when I feel motivated.
Or I'll clean the garage when I have the energy.
Yes. But the English Easy Practice podcast source, it completely dismantles this myth. They present this rule that flips our standard psychological model entirely on its head.
Right. They argue that motivation actually comes after action, not before.
Which means you essentially have to trip your own brain.
Yeah. The source highlights that if you just dedicate a mere 5 minutes to a task.
Just 5 minutes.
Yeah, or aim for a 1% improvement, that is the actual trigger that manufactures willpower out of thin air. Instead of waiting to feel ready, the act of starting generates the feeling.
The behavioral psychology behind this is just fascinating, specifically, regarding the dopamine feedback loop.
Oh, right. Let's talk about the dopamine.
So when you actually start a task, say washing a single dish or just listening to one 5-minute audio clip, your brain registers this micro accomplishment.
It's like checking a tiny box in your head.
Exactly. And it releases a tiny hit of dopamine. And that dopamine, it isn't just a feel-good chemical. It's actually a predictive mechanism.
Wait, what do you mean predictive?
It tells your brain, hey, that wasn't so bad, and we achieved something. Let's do it again to get more of that reward.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that anticipation of the next reward is the exact physical sensation that we experience as motivation.
That makes so much sense. Which I guess explains the rather extreme advice from Georgiana's ESL podcast.
The repetition stuff.
Yeah, the sheer power of repetition. She notes that when you're a beginner at anything, you need 20 to 30 repetitions of a 5-minute audio clip to consolidate those linguistic patterns.
20 to 30 times.
I know. Reading that initial number feels entirely demoralizing. Absolutely no one has the natural inspiration to listen to the same 5 minutes of audio 30 times.
Nobody. But the neuroscience of neural pathways, it doesn't care about your inspiration.
Right.
Georgiana explains that doing this really unglamorous action, just 15 minutes a day for 7 days, it physically alters the brain structure.
So you literally rewire yourself through the action.
Exactly. You stop painstakingly translating words in your head and you start understanding them automatically. The action builds the foundational architecture entirely independent of whether you felt passionate about doing it.
Which perfectly brings us to the behavioral economics of Peter the Penguin.
Oh, I love Peter the Penguin.
Such a great story. So Georgiana uses these mini stories to teach, right? And she tells this incredibly grounding anecdote about a penguin who desperately wants to be a Wall Street broker. Naturally. But to overcome his inability to speak English, Peter applies this action-first principle to an absurd extreme.
Oh.
He listens to English audios for 12 hours a day.
12 hours.
Yeah. He moves to New York, he applies for the Wall Street job, and he gets rejected.
Brutal.
It is. But he ultimately becomes a waiter in a fine restaurant instead, and he's happy.
It's a storyline that completely abandons that typical fairy tale ending we usually get in educational anecdotes.
Right. He doesn't conquer Wall Street.
He doesn't. But his story perfectly illustrates the concept of asymmetric returns. Like, extreme action guarantees a new position, even if it's not the initial goal you envision.
Yeah, his 12-hour action loop solved the language deficit.
And put him in a position to succeed in a totally different capacity. Action is the great equalizer. It precedes motivation, and it precedes results.
So because we are wired to require action before we feel motivated, it actually makes total sense that our language evolved to describe helping others as a physical act.
Rather than just an internal feeling.
Exactly. Look at the idioms we use in English to describe assisting someone. They are intensely anatomical.
The hand idioms.
Yes. The Espresso English source lists this entire catalog of phrases relying on the word hand. We give a hand, we lend a hand.
Have our hands full.
Right, or we take matters into our own hands.
Notice how we never say lend a thought.
Oh, wow.
Or give a feeling. Empathy, the internal sensation of concern for someone else, it's completely invisible.
Right, you can't see it.
Exactly. In early human communities, survival depended on visible, tangible cooperation. If your neighbor's roof was collapsing in a storm, feeling empathetic didn't keep the rain out.
Providing physical labor did.
Yes. The physical action was the only measurable proof of the internal feeling, which is why a physical body part became the ultimate linguistic metaphor for kindness.
And you see this evolutionary survival mechanism vividly when you look at the 100 words of kindness vocabulary list from our stack.
This list was fascinating.
It really was, because alongside standard modern terms like altruism, benevolence, there are these ancient Greek concepts that reframe kindness entirely.
Right. Zinnia and xenodoki.
Yes, which refer to guest friendship and the kind reception of strangers.
Because before formal laws or centralized governments or even currency, stepping outside your immediate tribe was functionally a death sentence.
You couldn't just book a hotel online.
Or rely on a police force.
Yeah.
So extending shelter to a stranger practicing xenia, it was an economic trade-off. It was basically an early institutionalized insurance policy.
Yeah, an insurance policy.
Yeah, by taking someone in, you established a localized network of safe harbors. You were guaranteeing that when you or your kin eventually had to travel, someone would honor that social contract and keep you alive.
It completely elevates hospitality from like a polite personality trait to a fundamental pillar of human existence. It's literally about ensuring a fellow human doesn't perish in the wilderness.
Exactly. And this simple Wikipedia entry on kindness reinforces this intensity. They quote the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche.
Oh, right.
He considered kindness and love to be the most curative herbs for humans.
Curative herbs. Framing kindness as a curative herb is deeply medicinal. It's a physical intervention.
It's a poultice applied to a wound.
Yeah. It acts upon the body and the community to heal it. It strips away any notion that kindness is just some soft, passive state of mind.
But this raises a really fascinating paradox.
Well,
If true kindness is about practical physical intervention, administering the herb, so to speak, what happens when the person you are trying to help doesn't understand your intervention?
oh, that is a great question. How do we demonstrate empathy when communication itself breaks down?
The Ontasol Guide for Teaching Low-Level ESL Learners offers a deeply counterintuitive answer to this.
Their primary directive to teachers, right?
Right.
Which is skip the courtesy for now.
Which sounds so rude.
It sounds incredibly rude. But they argue that using polite, courteous speech actually creates immense friction for the learner.
Because true linguistic empathy requires minimizing the recipient's cognitive load.
Right. Think about the last time you tried to give directions to a tourist who barely spoke English. Did you use full, polite sentences like, "Excuse me, sir, if you wouldn't mind proceeding down this thoroughfare"?
Absolutely not. You instinctively revert to caveman speech.
Exactly. You point and say, "Left, 2 blocks." Instinctively, we know that in moments of cognitive friction, clarity is kinder than courtesy.
But in our everyday lives, we forget this.
We really do. We are so conditioned to believe that dropping please and thank you is inherently offensive.
The guide provides a perfect illustration of this friction. If you say to a beginner, "Would it be possible for you to type your name in the chat box, please?" You are handing them a locked briefcase when all they need is the set of instructions inside.
That is such a good analogy.
Right. The student has to spend all their mental energy picking the lock of your etiquette. They are frantically trying to translate "would it be possible," and by the time they reach the actual command, "type your name," They're entirely lost.
Being overly polite to an ESL beginner is like throwing a drowning person a beautifully gift-wrapped life preserver.
Yes.
The elaborate wrapping, all those pleasantries, the idioms like break a leg, it makes the person throwing it feel incredibly generous and refined.
But it prevents the drowning person from actually grabbing the lifesaver, which is basic understanding.
Prioritizing your own desire to feel courteous over the other person's actual need for clarity is a total failure of empathy.
The guide explicitly instructs teachers to drop all idioms, use bare-bones phrases, and rely heavily on simple drawings.
Yeah, if you want a student to introduce themselves, asking, "Kindly tell me a little about yourself," is a trap.
A huge trap. You ask targeted, unmistakable questions. Where are you from? What is your job? You just strip away the social ornamentation.
The guide even addresses the teacher's physical reactions. Like, if you are frustrated because the communication is stalling, you are instructed to force a smile.
And you aren't doing this to be fake.
Right, you're doing it because showing your negative emotion transfers your discomfort onto the learner. It increases their cognitive load.
True empathy in this environment requires entirely removing your own ego from the equation. It forces us to redefine kindness.
It isn't about adhering to arbitrary etiquette rules just to make yourself look good.
Exactly. It is about guaranteeing the other person gets exactly what they need to succeed in that specific moment.
So taking these theories out of the theoretical classroom, the sources put them to the test in the ultimate proving grounds for human behavior.
Our homes and our neighborhoods.
Yes. The domestic chore podcasts, English Redo and English Time with Ben, they use household tasks to teach vocabulary, but underneath the vocabulary words for brooms and dishes.
They are teaching the exact mechanics of localized social contracts.
Yes. They refer to this concept explicitly as love in action during an episode where a mother and her daughter Sophie are cooking together.
Sophie's mom introduces this incredibly pragmatic golden rule for the kitchen.
Do it now, not later.
Do it now, not later, so the food doesn't stick to the dishes.
It just strips all the romanticism out of helping out, doesn't it? Like, we were just discussing Nietzsche and ancient Greek survival tactics, and here is the modern application. Wash the plate now so the oatmeal doesn't turn into cement.
But when mom says do it now, not later, she is teaching the foundational mechanism of community living.
How so?
Well, completing a mundane chore is a nonverbal communication of respect for shared resources. It is that action-first principle applied to a dirty plate.
Right, you don't wait for the dopamine hit of motivation to wash the dish.
No, you wash it to save your future self and your family from unnecessary suffering. When you leave the oatmeal to harden, you are consciously offloading the friction of your existence onto someone else.
Wow. And this is reinforced by their happy helper chart. Sophie learns to fold a t-shirt like a pro. She pulls weeds in the garden. The podcast reframe these activities not as drudgery or punishment, but as teamwork.
It is the physical manifestation of caring for the micro-ecosystem of the home,
which then expands outward into the neighborhood, the space where ancient Xenia meets the modern world.
The English for Real listening exercises provide brilliant contrasts of how these micro-actions uphold or destroy the broader social contract.
You really see the extremes of human behavior play out in mundane suburban settings here.
Oh, definitely, like Mr. Cartwright.
Right, the elderly neighbor that the narrator initially just dismisses as some nosy guy staring from his porch.
But then the narrator goes on vacation, a burglar attempts to break in, and Mr. Cartwright immediately calls the police and stops the robbery.
He's a protector. He is actively practicing zenodiki, the kind reception and protection of others, right from his front porch.
But conversely, you have spectacular failures of consideration.
Like the neighbor Gary.
Gary.
Gary acquires a new hobby, repairing old motorcycles, and decides the optimal time to test the revving engines is 6:30 a.m. on a Saturday.
Gary is the anti-Nietzsche.
He really is. He is administering the exact opposite of curative herbs to his community.
And then there is Nancy.
Oh, Nancy. The neighbor who agreed to pick up the narrator's kids from daycare completely forgot and left them stranded for 2.5 hours.
Nancy represents a fundamental breakdown of the social trust required for a community to function, because the macro is entirely dependent on the micro.
Meaning?
If you cannot master basic courtesy with your neighbor Gary, or if you cannot be trusted to pick up a child, keep your noise down, or wash the oatmeal off a shared plate, you are incapable of practicing grand concepts like global altruism.
The localized social contract is the training ground. If you consistently fail the micro tests of empathy, You will not be the hero who runs into the burning building or saves the stranger in the wilderness.
Every grand philosophical concept is built on a foundation of seemingly trivial actions.
Looking back at the journey through these sources, we've really dismantled several comfortable myths about how we operate.
We discovered that motivation is not a weather system we wait for.
Right, it's a chemical reaction manufactured by simply taking a 5-minute action.
We examined how that requirement for action drove our language to describe empathy as the physical lending of a hand.
And how ancient hospitality was actually a rigorous insurance policy for mutual survival.
We learned from online ESL guides that prioritizing polite gift wrapping over clear communication is a failure of empathy.
And that sometimes true kindness requires speaking like a caveman.
And we saw these virtues tested in the mundane reality of washing dishes and dealing with neighbors, proving that respect for shared resources is the bedrock of any functioning society.
So for you listening right now, consider your own internal happy helper chart today. What is one small 5-minute action you can take to trigger that dopamine loop?
Maybe it's tackling a chore you've been actively avoiding.
Or sending a brutally clear, supportive message to a friend. Take the action first, without waiting for the inspiration, and watch the motivation manufacture itself.
You do not need to feel perfectly aligned or inspired to start doing good in your immediate ecosystem.
And as you move through that ecosystem, consider one final, provocative thought regarding the anti-sol advice. We established that skipping the courtesy is an act of deep empathy for ESL learners because it removes cognitive friction.
Right.
But think about how often we fail to apply that rule to our everyday relationships with fluent speakers. Think about your partner, your family, or your closest friends. How often do you hide your true needs behind complex politeness, passive-aggressive hints, and emotional idioms?
Oh, all the time. We wrap our feelings in so much decorative etiquette that the people who love us most have to pick the lock just to figure out what we actually want them to do.
We operate under the assumption that being polite is the exact same thing as being kind. But what if the ultimate act of kindness in any intimate relationship isn't performing flawless courtesy? What if true intimacy is dropping the gift wrapping, stripping away the social ornamentation, and being perfectly undeniably clear about what we need and what we can give?